Easy now.
The cowboy was close to death, but she sucked out the venom. The
Just
rest is
breathe.
unbelievable
It's gonna be
Wild
okay.
West. The sun was high in the sky, burning the wide, empty desert with a heat that seemed to make the earth itself shimmer. Dust and sand blew across the plains, and the horizon seemed like a distant, wavering line that never got any closer. A lone cowboy rode steadily along a narrow trail, his horse's hooves kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The cowboy was a man of few words, used to traveling alone, and he had the kind of rugged face that came from years of living under the sun, fighting wind, dust, and time. His eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the canyon walls and the open plains ahead. He had been riding for hours, looking for a hidden watering hole that could save his horse from exhaustion, and he knew that if he did not find it soon, both he and his horse would be in serious trouble. The cowboy's boots dug into the stirrups as he urged his horse forward. He felt the familiar rhythm of the horse beneath him, the way the muscles moved and strained, the way the animal responded to subtle commands. There was comfort in this routine, a sense of control over a world that was otherwise harsh and unpredictable. But the desert was always full of surprises, and even the most experienced riders had to remain alert. As he rode along a narrow path near the rocks, the cowboy noticed a small movement out of the corner of his eye. A snake, its body patterned in shades of brown and gold, slithered across the sun-baked stones. It was almost invisible against the dry earth, but the glint of its scales in the sun caught his attention just in time. Before he could react, the snake struck with lightning speed. Its fangs sank into his leg and pain shot through him like fire. He had been bitten by a rattlesnake, and the venom was already beginning to spread. His horse whinnied in alarm, sensing the sudden panic in its rider. The cowboy swore under his breath, gripping the reins tightly as he tried to stay upright. Panic and fear surged through him, a rare feeling for a man who was used to controlling every situation. The pain in his leg was sharp, burning and swelling quickly. He knew the danger. Venomous bites could be deadly if not treated immediately. His surroundings suddenly seemed vast and empty, a hostile landscape with no help in sight. He was alone, miles from the nearest town, and the nearest doctor could be hours away. The desert, which he had always considered a place of freedom, now felt like a trap. He dismounted as soon as he could, sliding down from the horse with careful movements, though every step sent waves of pain up his leg. He needed to find shade and a way to slow the venom from spreading. The sun was relentless, beating down on his back, making sweat run down his forehead and soak his shirt. He leaned against a rock, trying to catch his breath and thinking about his options. Time was running out, and the desert offered no mercy. The cowboy's mind raced. He remembered the stories he had heard of people surviving snake bites in the wilderness, but most of those stories involved having someone else there to help. He had no such luxury. The nearest town was a day's ride away, and he was already weak from the pain and the growing fear that he might not make it. His heart pounded in his chest as he looked around, desperate for a sign of anything, a water source, a tree, or even a passing traveler. But the desert seemed endless, with nothing but rocks, sand, and the occasional scrub brush. As he sat there, fighting against the pain, he realized just how vulnerable he had become. He had always prided himself on being independent, strong, and capable of handling whatever the Wild West threw at him. But now, for the first time, he felt truly helpless. The venom coursing through his veins was a reminder that no matter how tough a person might be, nature always had the final say. His horse, sensing the danger, nudged him with its nose, trying to offer comfort, but even that small reassurance was not enough. He knew he could not rely on the animal to save him. He needed help, and he needed it soon. His thoughts drifted to the stories of cowboys who had died alone in the desert, victims of their own stubbornness and pride. He did not want to join that list. Not today. Not like this. With great effort, he tried to stand, using the horse for support. The pain was almost unbearable, a constant reminder that his time might be running out. His leg throbbed with each movement, and he knew that continuing to ride in this condition could be fatal. He needed someone with knowledge, someone who could act quickly, or he would not survive. The sun continued its relentless climb, and shadows shifted across the rocks, offering no comfort. Just as despair began to take hold, a faint sound reached his ears, the sound of movement, deliberate and calm, almost as if someone were walking carefully across the rocks. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be another traveler, a rescuer? Or just another mirage of the desert playing tricks on him? He squinted into the distance, shading his eyes with one hand, and then he saw her, a figure approaching with steady, confident steps. She was a woman, dressed in practical clothing suitable for the wilderness, with a small bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes were sharp and focused, and there was a calmness in her presence that contrasted sharply with his growing panic. She did not rush or stumble. She walked with purpose, as if she had been expecting this moment. The cowboy, weak and in pain, felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps he was not doomed after all. The woman knelt beside him without hesitation, her movements swift and precise. She examined the bite, her hands steady and practiced. She spoke softly, giving instructions and reassurance, though the cowboy could barely focus on her words. Her calmness was contagious, and he felt a glimmer of strength return. She opened her small satchel and pulled out tools and remedies, items that seemed almost magical in their simplicity. Without warning, she leaned forward and performed the act that would save his life. She carefully sucked out the venom from the bite, her knowledge and courage evident in every motion. The cowboy felt a mix of relief and disbelief. He had heard of such acts in stories, but he had never imagined experiencing it himself. The pain began to ease slightly, though his leg still throbbed, and he could feel his strength returning bit by bit. As she worked, she spoke calmly, telling him to remain still and conserve his energy. The cowboy obeyed, amazed at her confidence and skill. He realized that she was not an ordinary traveler. She possessed knowledge and experience that went far beyond what he had expected. In a world where danger was everywhere, she was a beacon of hope. By the time she finished, the immediate threat had passed. The swelling had slowed and the worst of the pain had diminished. The cowboy, still weak and shaken, looked at her with gratitude and awe. He had been so close to death, and yet here she was, a stranger who had risked herself to save him. For the first time in a long while, he felt the true meaning of human kindness and bravery. The desert, once a place of fear and isolation, now seemed a little less threatening. The sun continued to burn overhead, but the cowboy knew he could survive the journey ahead, thanks to her. He felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief, his body trembling from the ordeal but his spirit lifted by the presence of someone who had truly made a difference. As they prepared to move on, he realized that this encounter would stay with him forever. He had faced death and lived, not because of his own strength alone, but because of the courage and skill of another. The Wild West was full of stories, but this was one that would be remembered. A story of survival, bravery, and the unexpected heroes who appear when they are needed most. And so, with the sun beginning its slow descent, the cowboy and the woman started their journey together, moving carefully through the harsh landscape. Each step was a reminder of the narrow line between life and death, and of the extraordinary courage it took to survive in a world where danger could appear at any moment. The desert still stretched endlessly around them, but the fear that had once gripped the cowboy had been replaced by determination and gratitude. He had been close to death, but now, with her guidance, he could continue. The journey had only just begun, and the lessons he would learn along the way were as vast and uncharted as the plains themselves. The cowboy's leg still throbbed as he followed the woman through the rocky canyon. Every step reminded him of how close he had come to death, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude that mixed with awe. He had faced many dangers before: gunfights, storms, and long treks through the desert. But nothing had felt as immediate and terrifying as the venom coursing through his veins just hours ago. Now, walking beside the woman, he realized that he owed his life to someone he had only just met. The woman moved with calm confidence, her steps sure and steady over the uneven ground. She seemed perfectly at home in the desert, aware of every loose rock, every shift of sand, and every shadow cast by the sun. Her bag, small and well-worn, hung at her side, carrying everything she might need for survival: herbs, bandages, a small knife, and other tools that the cowboy could not name. He could not help but notice the way she scanned their surroundings, alert for any danger, even as she guided him carefully forward. "Slow down a bit," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You need to save your strength. The venom has weakened you more than you realize." The cowboy nodded, grateful for her knowledge. His pride, usually strong and unyielding, was set aside. He allowed her to lead, trusting her judgment completely. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a mix of sand, rocks, and distant hills that seemed to rise like walls against the horizon. The heat pressed down relentlessly, and the wind carried grit that stung their eyes and made breathing a little harder with each step. Yet with her beside him, the journey seemed less impossible. As they walked, the cowboy tried to make conversation, wanting to learn more about the woman who had saved his life. "You've done this before, haven't you?" he asked, his voice rough from both the pain and the desert air. She glanced at him, a faint smile on her lips. "More times than I can count," she said. "People come into the desert thinking they're alone, thinking they can handle it all. But the desert doesn't forgive mistakes. I've learned how to help those who find themselves in trouble." Her words carried a calm authority, and the cowboy felt a mix of respect and curiosity. He had always believed in self-reliance, in relying on one's own strength and skill. But now he saw that courage sometimes meant letting someone else take the lead, even when you were used to being in control. He wanted to understand more about her life, about how she had come to learn such skills, but he also knew there was no rush. Every step they took was measured, deliberate, and necessary. The woman led him to a small, shaded area beneath a rock overhang. It was not much, but it offered respite from the harsh sun. She motioned for him to sit, and he lowered himself carefully, leaning against the cool stone. She knelt beside him again, examining his leg. The swelling had gone down slightly, but it was still tender and red. She applied a few more remedies, wrapping it gently to reduce strain and prevent infection. The cowboy watched her work, fascinated by the ease and confidence with which she moved. "You've got to be careful from here on," she said. "Even a small misstep could make the bite worse or cause new problems. The desert has a way of testing people, and it doesn't wait for anyone." He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The desert had always been a place of challenge, but he realized that it was also a teacher, harsh, demanding, and unforgiving. He had survived many dangers before, but this encounter had reminded him that life was fragile, that sometimes survival depended not only on skill and strength, but also on the kindness and knowledge of others. While he rested, the woman shared small details about her life in the wilderness. She had grown up in harsh conditions, learning to survive in places where water was scarce, food was hard to find, and danger was always close at hand. She spoke of the animals she had observed, the storms she had endured, and the people she had helped. Her stories were not grand tales of heroism, but simple, honest accounts of a life lived in constant awareness of the world around her. The cowboy listened intently, feeling a strange mix of admiration and humility. He had thought of himself as a survivor, but her life had been a continuous struggle, a series of challenges that she had faced with skill, patience, and courage. Her calmness in the face of danger was not born from luck, he realized, but from experience and careful attention. "You make it sound easy," he said quietly, trying not to sound impressed though he was. "It's not easy," she replied, her tone serious. "It takes attention, practice, and respect for the land. You can't force nature to work in your favor. You have to move with it, not against it." He thought about his own life in the Wild West, all the risks he had taken, all the moments he had relied on luck as much as skill. She was right. The desert demanded respect, and in her presence he felt a sense of humility he rarely experienced. After a short rest, she helped him back onto his horse. The ride was slow, deliberate, and careful. She walked alongside them, her eyes scanning the terrain, ready to guide him if necessary. The desert, which had seemed endless and threatening, now felt more navigable, though still dangerous. Every step reminded him of the fragility of life, of how quickly fortune could change. As they traveled, they encountered small signs of life: a lizard darting across a rock, a cactus flowering despite the harsh conditions, birds calling from distant cliffs. These small details seemed to reassure the cowboy, reminding him that even in the harshest places, life could thrive. And yet, he remained aware of the danger, knowing that one misstep could be fatal. The woman continued to speak quietly as they moved, offering tips on hydration, pacing, and observing the land. Her knowledge was practical, precise, and grounded in years of experience. The cowboy absorbed every word, feeling a growing respect for her abilities. He realized that surviving the desert was not just about strength and endurance, but about observation, patience, and understanding the environment. By late afternoon, they reached a small creek hidden among rocks. The water was cool and clear, a rare treasure in the desert. The cowboy dismounted, letting the woman guide him to the edge. He drank deeply, feeling life return to his body with every sip. The horse also drank, lowering its head and lapping the water eagerly. The cowboy felt a sense of relief he could not put into words, relief that he was still alive, that he had met someone who had saved him, and that he could continue on this journey with hope rather than fear. They rested by the creek as the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert. The cowboy watched the woman work, gathering a small amount of herbs and preparing a simple meal. Her movements were efficient, careful, and deliberate, revealing a life lived in constant preparation for the unexpected. He marveled at how someone could live so independently, yet so kindly, helping strangers without hesitation. "Why do you help people like me?" he asked finally, unable to contain his curiosity. She paused, looking out across the desert. "Because someone helped me once," she said softly, "and I knew what it felt like to be alone, scared, and helpless. If I can give someone a chance to survive, then I do. That's all there is to it." The cowboy was silent for a moment, reflecting on her words. They were simple, but they carried a weight he had rarely encountered. In the harsh world of the Wild West, where people often looked out only for themselves, her compassion was extraordinary. He felt a growing respect, not just for her skill, but for her heart. As night began to fall, they prepared to make camp near the creek. The cowboy helped set up a small fire, while the woman arranged their sleeping area. The desert night was cold and quiet, a sharp contrast to the scorching heat of the day. Stars blanketed the sky, and the sounds of the wilderness, insects, distant coyotes, and the rustle of leaves surrounded them. For the first time since his encounter with the snake, the cowboy felt a sense of peace. He realized that the woman had not only saved his life, but had also changed the way he viewed the desert, danger, and human connection. Her presence had transformed fear into hope, desperation into trust, and isolation into companionship. The cowboy knew that this experience would stay with him forever, a reminder of courage, kindness, and the unexpected heroes who appear when they are most needed. And so, as the fire crackled and the stars shone brightly overhead, the cowboy rested, leaning back against the rocks, and allowed himself to feel gratitude. He had survived a deadly encounter, met someone extraordinary, and learned that bravery sometimes meant letting go of pride and accepting help. The desert still held its dangers, but with her guidance, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The night passed quietly, and when the first light of dawn touched the desert, they prepared to continue their journey. The cowboy felt a mixture of caution and determination, knowing that the road ahead would not be easy. But he also felt a deep sense of trust in the woman who had saved him, a bond forged in the face of danger and hardship. Together, they moved forward, step by step, ready to face the challenges of the Wild West, knowing that their story was only beginning. The sun had barely risen when the cowboy and the woman continued their journey through the rugged terrain. The morning air was crisp, carrying a faint scent of desert plants and dry earth. His leg, though still tender, felt stronger after the rest by the creek and her careful attention. He rode with a slow, deliberate rhythm, trusting her guidance as they navigated the rocky paths and sandy stretches. Every step reminded him of the life that had been spared, and a deep sense of gratitude followed him like a shadow. As they moved along, the cowboy noticed her observing the land with an intensity that went beyond mere survival. Her eyes scanned for signs of water, shelter, and potential dangers, yet also lingered on small details. A patch of wildflowers clinging to life among the rocks, birds darting between cliffs, and the faint tracks of animals long gone. She seemed to understand the desert as a living entity, one that required respect and careful attention. He felt a mixture of admiration and humility. He had thought himself knowledgeable about the wilderness, yet her awareness surpassed anything he had known. "You have a keen eye," he said cautiously, not wanting to seem presumptuous. "I've been through these parts many times, but you notice things I've never seen." She glanced at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Experience teaches you to watch closely. The desert is always speaking if you know how to listen. Some people think it's empty, lifeless, or just sand and rocks. They are wrong. It has life, lessons, and dangers hidden in every corner." The cowboy nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He had underestimated the desert's complexity, relying too often on instinct and brute strength rather than observation. Her presence reminded him that survival was more than physical endurance. It required patience, awareness, and the humility to learn from someone who understood the land better. As the morning wore on, the path grew steeper, leading them toward a narrow canyon that cut deep into the desert floor. The shadows provided some relief from the sun, but the rocky terrain made every step of the horse a careful calculation. The cowboy clutched the reins tightly, following the woman's lead as she guided him through the most precarious stretches. Her confidence never wavered, and he began to realize that her calmness was as vital as any physical remedy in ensuring his survival. During a brief stop on a flat plateau, the woman handed him a small piece of dried fruit and water from a canteen. "Eat a little," she said. "You need energy. Even a small bite will help you keep going." He accepted it reluctantly, unused to needing assistance, but recognizing that his pride was less important than staying alive. As he chewed, he watched her prepare a simple bandage for his leg, adjusting the wrap to reduce strain and allow circulation. She worked quietly, efficiently, with a focus that left him impressed and thankful. He realized that she had mastered skills that combined knowledge, instinct, and empathy, and he could not imagine facing the desert without her. The canyon walls rose higher around them, and the light of the sun created patterns on the rocky surfaces that seemed almost magical. Despite the danger, there was beauty in the landscape. The way shadows shifted, the colors of the rocks changing with the angle of light, and the distant mountains painted in soft hues of red and gold. For a man used to the hardships of the Wild West, it was rare to see the desert as a place of wonder, but with her by his side, he began to notice the small, extraordinary details he had overlooked for years. As they moved deeper into the canyon, the woman told stories of her own past adventures, each tale illustrating lessons learned and dangers survived. She spoke of sandstorms that could blind a man in moments, sudden floods that turned calm washes into raging torrents, and encounters with wildlife that demanded both courage and respect. Her stories were not exaggerated. They were lived experiences, told with a mix of seriousness and subtle humor. The cowboy listened, absorbing each lesson, realizing that he was learning not just survival skills, but also a philosophy of life, one that valued patience, observation, and respect over reckless bravery. "You've seen a lot," he said finally, breaking a thoughtful silence. "I've survived many things, but you faced the desert in ways I can't imagine." She looked at him calmly, her eyes reflecting both experience and humility. "We all face the desert in our own way," she said. "Some survive by strength, some by cleverness, and some by learning to respect it. The trick is knowing which approach works for the situation at hand, and sometimes it's about trusting the right person when you can't manage alone." He felt a deep resonance in her words. He had always relied on himself, trusting only his instincts and skills. But after the snake bite, he understood the truth of her statement, that survival often depended on collaboration, courage, and accepting help when necessary. He realized that he had underestimated the importance of trust and human connection in a world so often dominated by danger and isolation. By midday, they found a small grove of desert shrubs providing shade and a little relief from the sun's relentless heat. The cowboy dismounted again, stretching his legs and taking the opportunity to rest. She sat beside him, opening her small bag and pulling out a few simple items to make their temporary stop more comfortable. Her efficiency in organizing the space, providing water, and tending to his leg impressed him. It was clear that she had developed these skills through necessity, not by chance. As they rested, the woman spoke about the importance of preparation and awareness. "Every step in the desert matters," she said. "You can't ignore small details. A rock out of place, a shift in the wind, the tracks of an animal, these all tell a story. Listen to the desert and it will guide you." The cowboy absorbed her words, reflecting on the times he had ignored such signs, relying instead on sheer determination. He realized how close he had come to disaster and how much he still had to learn. Her guidance was not just saving his life physically, it was shaping his understanding of survival, caution, and observation. They ate a simple meal together, dried meat, bread, and water, sharing the food quietly. The cowboy felt a growing connection with her, not just because she had saved him, but because of the calm, practical way she approached every challenge. He admired her strength, intelligence, and quiet confidence, qualities that contrasted sharply with the fear and uncertainty he had felt hours earlier. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, they continued their trek. The terrain became more challenging, with steep inclines and loose rocks. Every step tested their endurance, yet they moved steadily, each trusting the other's guidance and instincts. The cowboy began to understand that survival in the desert was as much mental as physical, requiring focus, patience, and an unwavering awareness of the environment. By evening, they reached a ridge overlooking a wide expanse of desert. The view was breathtaking, with the sun casting long shadows across the dunes and distant mountains glowing in shades of orange and red. The cowboy paused, taking in the sight, and felt a strange mix of exhaustion, relief, and wonder. He realized that despite the danger and hardships, the desert held a beauty that few truly appreciated. And standing beside him was the woman who had guided him safely through it, a figure of strength and courage against the vast, unforgiving landscape. As night approached, they set up camp beneath a cluster of rocks. The woman gathered firewood while he helped with the preparations, feeling a sense of partnership and trust. The fire crackled to life, casting warm light on the surrounding rocks, and the cowboy felt a deep sense of peace he had not experienced in years. For the first time, he saw the desert not only as a place of danger, but as a landscape of survival, resilience, and quiet beauty. They shared stories by the fire, the woman recounting past experiences and the cowboy reflecting on the day's journey. He realized that he had learned more in these past hours than in years of solitary wandering. Her presence had opened his eyes to the importance of knowledge, observation, and human connection. He understood that survival was not just about strength and courage, but about wisdom, preparation, and trust. As the stars appeared in the clear night sky, the cowboy leaned back against the rocks, feeling gratitude and wonder. The woman had saved his life, guided him through the desert, and taught him lessons that would remain with him forever. He understood that this journey was not just about reaching civilization. It was about discovering resilience, respect for the wilderness, and the unexpected power of kindness and skill. And as the fire burned low, casting flickering shadows across the desert floor, the cowboy knew that the bond formed with the woman was something extraordinary. He had been close to death, but now, with her by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges the Wild West might throw at him next. The desert remained dangerous, unpredictable, and vast, but for the first time, he felt equipped not only to survive, but to understand and respect the world around him in a way he never had before. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the rocky terrain in soft, golden hues. The cowboy and the woman packed up their small camp with quiet efficiency. The air was crisp, and the wind carried the faint scent of sagebrush and dry earth. After days of travel and survival, the cowboy felt a sense of readiness he had not known before. Though his legs still throbbed slightly, he was stronger, more alert, and more aware of every step he took. The woman, ever vigilant, checked the path ahead and adjusted their route to avoid rough terrain and conserve their energy. The journey back toward civilization was not easy. The land was harsh, unyielding, and full of hidden dangers. Loose rocks threatened to send the horse slipping, and dry washes could suddenly turn into treacherous obstacles. Yet the cowboy felt a growing confidence in their progress. He had survived the snake bite, learned to rely on another, and now moved with careful determination. Each step forward reminded him of the life that had been spared, and he knew that he could not afford to waste this second chance. As they rode through a narrow pass, the woman paused and studied the ground carefully. She pointed to a faint set of tracks. "We're not alone," she said softly. "Someone has passed this way recently. Could be travelers, could be predators. Either way, we need to stay alert." The cowboy's heart quickened. He had faced many dangers in his life, gunfights, storms, and wild animals. But the thought of an unknown presence nearby brought a new tension. He trusted the woman's instincts, knowing that her awareness often exceeded his own. Together, they moved carefully, watching the shadows, listening to the wind, and reading the land for signs of movement. Hours passed as they continued through the rugged terrain. The woman shared more of her knowledge, teaching the cowboy how to read subtle signs. The way the sand shifted in the wind, the shape of distant rocks that might conceal water, and the patterns left by animals that could indicate predators or safe paths. The cowboy absorbed each lesson, realizing that survival was not just about strength and courage, but also about understanding and respecting the environment. At midday, they stopped to rest in the shade of a small rock formation. The woman pulled out a small bundle of dried food and water, offering the cowboy a chance to regain energy. He accepted gratefully, realizing that these small pauses were just as important as the effort to keep moving. As he ate, he watched the woman carefully scan the horizon. Her attention never wavered, her mind always alert for any sign of danger. He admired her calmness and skill, recognizing that it had taken years of experience to move through the wilderness with such confidence. As they traveled on, the terrain grew even more challenging. Rocky slopes gave way to sandy dunes, making every step a test of endurance. The cowboy's leg reminded him of its weakness, but he pushed forward, guided by the woman's steady presence. Together, they navigated the shifting sands, the horse's hooves sinking slightly with each step, threatening to throw them off balance. Yet her instructions were precise and clear, and he followed them carefully, learning to trust her guidance completely. The desert was alive with subtle signs of life. A lizard darting across a sun-baked rock, birds calling from distant cliffs, and the faint tracks of rabbits and foxes. The cowboy realized that these small details, which he had often overlooked in the past, held clues for survival. He began to move with greater awareness, noticing patterns in the environment that helped him anticipate obstacles and conserve energy. By late afternoon, they reached a narrow canyon with steep walls and uneven footing. The woman guided the horse carefully along a ledge, instructing the cowboy on how to maintain balance and avoid slipping. His heart raced with every cautious step, yet he felt a growing sense of accomplishment. He was learning not just to survive, but to navigate the desert with skill, patience, and respect. While moving through the canyon, they came across signs of a recent storm, debris, broken branches, and small pools of water that had collected in rock depressions. The woman used these signs to adjust their route, avoiding unstable areas and finding safer paths. The cowboy marveled at her ability to read the land with such precision. It was a skill born of experience, observation, and a deep understanding of the wilderness that he had never known. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, they found a small plateau overlooking a vast stretch of desert. The view was breathtaking, with the setting sun casting long shadows and painting the distant mountains in deep shades of orange and red. The cowboy paused, taking in the sight, and felt a profound sense of wonder. Despite the dangers and hardships, the desert was beautiful in ways he had never truly appreciated. The woman set up a small camp, gathering wood for a fire and preparing a simple meal. The cowboy assisted where he could, grateful for the opportunity to contribute and learn. As they ate, they spoke quietly about the day's journey, reflecting on the challenges they had faced and the lessons they had learned. The cowboy realized that he had grown not only stronger but wiser, understanding the importance of observation, patience, and teamwork in the harshest of environments. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply, and the desert became quiet except for the soft rustle of wind through the rocks. The cowboy huddled near the fire, feeling the warmth on his face and hands. He thought about how close he had come to death, and how much he had learned from the woman who had saved him. Her guidance had transformed fear into confidence, isolation into companionship, and desperation into hope. During the night, the woman remained alert, listening to the subtle sounds of the desert. The cowboy, though exhausted, felt safer knowing she was watchful. He realized that trust was as important as strength in the wilderness. With her by his side, he could face challenges he never thought he could endure. He had learned that survival depended not only on skill, but also on the courage to rely on another person when the situation demanded it. The next morning, they resumed their journey. The terrain became less hostile as they approached areas where small settlements were more common. The cowboy felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. He knew that civilization was near, but he also knew that the lessons of the desert, patience, awareness, and respect, would stay with him long after the journey ended. Along the way, they encountered small obstacles, fallen rocks, dry riverbeds, and patches of cacti that required careful navigation. Each challenge tested their endurance and coordination, yet they moved forward steadily. The cowboy realized that he was learning not just from her guidance but from the desert itself, which demanded constant attention and respect. By midday, they spotted a faint trail leading toward a distant settlement. The cowboy's heart lifted at the sight, knowing that safety, food, and shelter were within reach. Yet he also understood that the journey was not just about reaching civilization. It was about how they had survived and grown along the way. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the woman, whose skill, courage, and calmness had guided him through the most dangerous hours of his life. As they approached the settlement, the woman slowed the horse, allowing him to take in the sight. Smoke rose from chimneys and the sounds of daily life, children playing, animals moving, and people working filled the air. The cowboy felt a mix of relief, wonder, and humility. He had faced death, survived the desert, and learned lessons he would never forget. When they finally entered the outskirts of the town, people looked at them with curiosity and respect. The cowboy realized that his journey through the desert had not only tested his physical endurance, but also reshaped his understanding of courage, trust, and human connection. The woman who had saved him was no ordinary traveler. She was a skilled guide, healer, and survivor, whose presence had turned a near-tragic encounter into a story of hope and resilience. They found a small inn where they could rest, tending to their horses and preparing for the night. The cowboy reflected on everything that had happened, the snake bite, the desert journey, and the lessons he had learned. He knew that he would never forget this experience, nor the woman who had risked herself to save a stranger. Her bravery, skill, and kindness had left an indelible mark on him, shaping not only his survival but also his understanding of the world. As the night settled in, he finally allowed himself to relax completely. The fire crackled in the inn's hearth, and the sounds of the town outside reminded him of the life waiting beyond the desert. Yet he also knew that the lessons of the wilderness and the bond forged through shared struggle would stay with him forever. The cowboy understood that the journey back to civilization was not just a physical passage, but a test of endurance, courage, and trust. He had faced death, learned to rely on another, and discovered the extraordinary strength that came from human connection and shared experience. With the woman beside him, he felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that survival was not merely about strength, but about wisdom, observation, and the courage to accept help when it mattered most. And so, as the desert faded behind them and the lights of the town grew brighter, the cowboy felt a sense of accomplishment, gratitude, and newfound understanding. The journey had been hard, the challenges numerous, but together they had overcome every obstacle, proving that resilience, skill, and compassion could triumph even in the harshest conditions. The cowboy and the woman rode slowly into the small town, their journey through the desert finally reaching its end. Dust clung to their boots and clothes, and their horses were tired from the long ride. Yet despite the exhaustion, there was a sense of relief and accomplishment that radiated between them. The cowboy's leg was healing, his strength returning day by day, and his spirit had been forever changed by the ordeal he had survived. As they entered the main street, townspeople paused in their daily routines to watch the unusual pair. Few had seen travelers emerge from the desert with such determination and resilience. The cowboy noticed curious glances, nods of respect, and whispers of intrigue as they passed. He felt a mixture of pride and humility, knowing that the journey had tested him in ways he had never imagined. The woman guided him toward a small inn at the edge of town. The building was modest but welcoming, with a wooden porch and the faint smell of fresh bread from the kitchen. Inside, they found a room where the cowboy could rest properly, tend to his horse, and recover fully from his injuries. The woman helped him settle in, arranging a comfortable place for him to rest, and ensuring that he had water and food. Her attention to detail and care reminded him once again of her extraordinary skill and thoughtfulness. As the cowboy rested, he began to ask more about her. He had learned much from her during their journey, but her past remained largely a mystery. She had been confident and capable, knowledgeable about the desert, yet she had revealed little about herself beyond what was necessary for survival. The cowboy's curiosity grew, and he felt a strong desire to understand the woman who had saved his life so completely. Finally, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the town, the woman spoke. "There's something you should know," she said quietly. "I'm not just a traveler or someone who wanders the desert. I've been helping people like you for years, those who find themselves in danger and far from help." The cowboy looked at her, surprised. "You mean this isn't the first time?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. She shook her head, her expression calm but serious. "No, it's not. I've learned to read the land, anticipate danger, and provide aid when it's needed most. Some know me as a healer, others as a guide. In the desert, that knowledge can save a life, sometimes more than once." The cowboy was stunned. He had assumed that her skill and confidence were born from necessity alone, but now he realized that she had a reputation that reached far beyond the canyon, the plains, and the desert they had crossed together. She was a known figure, a legend of sorts, though one who acted quietly, without seeking attention or reward. He felt an overwhelming mix of admiration and gratitude, realizing that he had encountered someone truly remarkable. The townspeople soon took notice of the pair. Word spread quickly. A cowboy had been saved from a deadly snake bite in the desert by a skilled, mysterious woman. People came to the inn, eager to hear the story, to meet the woman who had risked herself to save a stranger. The cowboy watched as their expressions shifted from curiosity to awe, and he felt pride not for himself, but for the person who had guided him through the wilderness. As evening fell, the woman revealed more about her work. She had traveled countless miles, helping those who had no hope, saving lives in the harshest conditions, and teaching survival to those willing to learn. She had encountered bandits, wild animals, and natural disasters, yet her courage and knowledge had never failed her. The cowboy listened, fascinated, realizing that he had been part of a larger story, one of bravery, compassion, and extraordinary skill. The revelation left the cowboy feeling both humbled and inspired. He had faced death, endured fear, and survived thanks to her guidance. Now he understood that her presence in his life was no accident. She had chosen to help, not for reward, but because she understood what it meant to face danger alone and without hope. He reflected on his own life, the risks he had taken, and the pride he had placed in self-reliance. He realized that strength was not always about doing everything alone. Sometimes it was about knowing when to trust, when to accept help, and when to follow wisdom greater than one's own. The town soon settled into a quiet evening, but the story of the cowboy's survival spread quickly. Neighbors spoke of the woman who appeared like a guardian angel in the desert, saving a life with skill and courage. Children whispered about her bravery, and adults shared the tale in hushed, respectful tones. The cowboy felt a deep sense of connection to this community, understanding that his journey had touched not only his own life, but the lives of many others who would hear the story. In the following days, he worked on regaining full strength. The woman continued to guide him, showing him how to care for his leg, how to strengthen his body for travel, and how to remain aware of potential dangers. Their bond, forged in the desert, grew stronger with each passing day. He realized that the experience had changed him, not just physically but emotionally. He had learned lessons in humility, gratitude, and the quiet power of human kindness. As the cowboy recovered, he began to understand the true impact of the woman's actions. She had saved him not only from the immediate threat of the snake bite, but also from the harsh consequences of being alone in the wilderness. She had provided guidance, protection, and knowledge, tools that would remain with him for the rest of his life. He felt a profound respect for her, and a sense of awe at how a single act of courage could change the course of someone's life so completely. One evening, as the sun set in a brilliant display of colors, the cowboy and the woman stood outside the inn, watching the desert stretch into the distance. He spoke quietly, almost to himself, yet loud enough for her to hear. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. You saved my life more than once in more ways than I can count. I'll never forget this." She smiled softly, a quiet warmth in her eyes. "You don't have to thank me," she said. "I've done what I can and I will continue to do it for others. What matters is that you live, that you carry forward the lessons you've learned, and that you remember the value of trust and courage." The cowboy nodded, understanding her words in a way he had never understood the simple sayings of other men he had met in the Wild West. It was not only about survival, it was about wisdom, character, and the connections that shaped lives in ways that brute strength alone could never achieve. The next day, as he prepared to continue his own journey beyond the town, he felt a mix of excitement and reflection. He knew the desert would call him again, as it always did to those who had traveled its endless plains, but he also knew he was changed forever. He had learned the importance of observation, preparation, and trust. He had discovered that bravery was not only in facing danger, but also in accepting help when it was offered, and in recognizing the courage of others. Before he left, he and the woman shared a quiet moment of understanding. She handed him a small satchel with supplies, dried food, water, and a few essential tools. "For your journey," she said simply, "use it wisely and remember what you've learned." He accepted it with gratitude, realizing that this gesture symbolized far more than mere provisions. It represented guidance, trust, and the enduring impact of someone willing to help in a world often harsh and unforgiving. The cowboy felt a deep sense of connection to her, knowing that he would carry the memory of their shared journey forever. As he rode out of town, the sun rising behind him, he glanced back to see her standing quietly on the edge of the inn's porch. Her figure was calm, strong, and composed, a symbol of courage and skill that had shaped his life. He felt a surge of gratitude and inspiration, knowing that he had survived not only because of his own determination, but because of the extraordinary presence of another human being. The journey ahead was uncertain, but the cowboy felt ready. He knew that he had been tested, that he had learned, and that he had grown. The desert, once a place of fear and danger, had become a landscape of lessons, beauty, and possibility. And at the heart of it all was the woman who had appeared when he needed her most, a healer, a guide, and a reminder of the extraordinary strength found in courage, kindness, and wisdom. The story of the cowboy and the woman became a tale told across the Wild West, a story of survival, bravery, and the power of human connection. It was a story that inspired others to trust, to respect the land, and to recognize the value of those who step forward when lives hang in the balance. The cowboy himself would carry this story forever, a memory of danger narrowly avoided, lessons deeply learned, and a bond forged in the most unforgiving conditions imaginable. And so, as he rode into the distance, the desert stretching endlessly before him, the cowboy knew that he had been forever changed. He had faced death, survived the wilderness, and discovered the true meaning of courage and trust. The journey had ended, but the lessons and the memory of the woman who had saved his life would remain with him always, guiding his path through the Wild West and beyond.